Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to the continuation of our work with the externalization of the hierarchy. We are on the 9th program, or 09A, as I've gone back to the beginning of the book to pick up some of the pages which I had not commented upon. We're working with the seed groups, and we're looking at some of the first statements to be made about them. And there are other statements in Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1, and I think also in Esoteric Psychology 2. You know, between all that is said, we get the idea of why they may be important. As a matter of fact, that's what we're dealing with right now. The three reasons for their importance might be stated as follows. So number one, they constitute the germ of life, which will result in the emergence of the hierarchy at a later date upon Earth, coming forth from the seclusion of the ages to function again in the light of physical day. We get the idea that the hierarchy will be able to demonstrate its value and its work through these seed groups. They cover so many of the areas of possible service to humanity. Okay. Number two, they are a bridging group, bridging between the negative mass of mankind and the positive agency of the hierarchy. A bit like the new group of world servers in that respect, and probably every member of the world servers will find himself or herself working in relation to one of these 10 groups. There are also other modes of service, but the 10 groups are very attractive to the new group of world servers, and as stated, many of the methods of serving humanity can be found in the purpose of the groups. So a bridging group between the negative mass of mankind and the positive agency of the hierarchy is a bit like comparing the moon in the horoscope, the negative mass, with the rising sign pointing the way towards soul expression. That is the reason why in these groups emphasis is laid upon service, because that embodies response to the mass and its need, and upon soul contact, because that embodies response to the world of souls as typified for us in the occult hierarchy. So again, you know, we have the symbolism embodied in the god Janus, a two-faced god looking in both directions towards what might be done for a needy humanity and towards the kind of inspiration that can be gathered from the spiritual hierarchy of the planet, the better to serve humanity. Okay, so in one respect, we have the idea of the bridging group. These seed groups are that. And in another respect, maybe I can isolate it, constitute the germ of life. And they will be a conduit for the effective emergence of the hierarchy and the identification of the nature of that hierarchy by more and more human beings. And then number three, they also hold within themselves as a group the seeds of the coming civilization and the germ of the new culture. The germ of the life of the new age is there within the husk of the old age and the old forms, hence the opportunity, the service, and the problems of these groups. And remembering again, it's a 275-year project. And so we can imagine it beginning somewhere around 1925, or at least in the early 1930s, and basically it takes us approximately to the year 2200 for maybe the completion of the first stage of this seed group work. Group of seeds of the coming civilization and the germ of the new culture. These seed groups can grow into the new presentation of a better way of life, which will typify the Aquarian civilization. Let me endeavor, he says, to indicate to you in what manner these groups can measure up to the threefold demand or opportunity mentioned above. Okay. Number one, they conceal and nurture the germ or seed of the new civilization of the Aquarian age. Well, this we've been able to gather. So many advantages for humanity will emerge during the Aquarian age, and the seed groups are the beginning of the presentation of a better way, the presentation of those advantages, a better psychology, better methods of healing, better methods of education, let us say, a more just and less corrupt political system, a better way to understand religion, a better scientific approach, a better, maybe I mentioned, psychological approach, a better economic approach. We really need that. And going back to number one, the telepathic servers or workers, a better way to receive impression regarding the divine plan, and then the magical synthesis of all that. Yes, indeed, in germ, we have the possibility of a new way of living, which should inspire us all. They bridge between the old groups and the new groups, Okay. They bridge between the old groups and the new group, between the mass of men, of whom the foremost find their way into the new group of world servers, so to serve as a sign of advanced evolution, and the planetary hierarchy. First, initiates of the threshold into the new group of world servers, and then entry into hierarchy, and still some members of the hierarchy are to be found in the highest positions in the new group of world servers. They will constitute in the future an aspect of the hierarchy and its work upon the outer physical plane. So we can understand the enthusiasm surrounding these specialized groups, as they used to be called, at Meditation Mount when they were holding their, annual conferences. All of us are probably looking for the particular method of advancing service that these C groups represent. When we work in the Moria Federation, we're obviously involved with the educational aspect, the educators of the New Age, and to a certain extent, I think, the psychologists of the New Age, which he told us were more inclined towards academic occultism, and certainly we are, as we work there within the Moria Federation. Our method of service that we choose is very important for each one of us, and hopefully we choose aright in such a way that we meet a need and we use our particular abilities, the ones that we can best share to the advantage of the one who is served. You will note that the first opportunity concerns the spirit aspect, or the vital, impulsive life aspect of divinity, that the second concerns the soul aspect and the subjective consciousness aspect of divinity, and the third concerns the body aspect or the physical expression through consciousness of the divine life. Physical expression. And here the spirit aspect, number one, and the soul aspect, number two, maybe to mark that down. Concerns, whoop. All right, that's Zoom. All right, let's see if I can get back here to getting a bracket, which will help. The germ of life. And maybe we can look at it this way. The spirit aspect, see if we can get this correct. And maybe here, the soul aspect, and here, the body or manifestational aspect. And maybe the same for this next group of three. They bridge between the old groups and the new groups, and they will constitute in the future an aspect of the hierarchy. I think I put them in the proper place. So here, spirit aspect, soul aspect, or and the physical expression. The first three groups which I have formed are intended to be small reflections of these three aspects from the angle of modern need and the meeting of that need. Let's see how, we want to get the Tibetan's sense of the structure of the C groups as he conceived them to be, It was too bad, of course, to have to abandon that work, but such was the battle for the future of humanity. There was no way really to continue it. It was an emergency situation, very definitely. And one has to deal with necessities first. Okay. And hopefully I can get this so that it stands out. Yeah, when I'm using that fuchsia color, it really is meant to be purple, but there isn't any, strictly speaking, purple to highlight with, or is there violet? This has a bit more red in it, you know. Okay. So if we think about the telepathic communicators, deal with the first aspect, the spirit aspect. Okay. The observers of reality deal with the second aspect, or the consciousness aspect, and the esoteric healers deal with the body aspect, or manifestational aspect. He did say that if you want to be an esoteric healer, there has to be some kind of orientation towards the physical plane, maybe a stronger orientation towards the physical plane than in the case of the observers of reality, and the telepathic communicators. So the first three are kind of a macrocosm of everything that develops after that. And the 10th seed group synthesizes, gathers from each one of the previous 9, 3 from each of those, making 27 in all. Interesting number. The number that he presents in relation to the advanced esoteric schools, 24 students, 24 being the number of Shambhala, and 3 teachers, if we can call them teachers. They are deeply trained spiritual guides, initiates, obviously. 27 in all. Okay, I have indicated somewhat the intended work of the first group from the angle of telepathic interplay and telepathy and the etheric vehicle. So he gave those instructions out before this particular essay was written. What do we have here? Is this 1937, I think? The method of communication between the members of the hierarchy has to be externalized, and that must be a very accurate type of telepathy, eventually upon Earth. And this is one of the tasks of that group, to externalize the hierarchical mode of communication, which is telepathic. So maybe we can put it down that way, to externalize the hierarchical mode of communication, which is telepathic. Okay. I know some people who type a lot better than I do. Okay. It might be of service to you if I outlined a little more clearly what is the purpose of the new seed groups in terms of the new age civilization and culture, so that the practical results might be visioned. with clarity, and some new ideals emerge as to the quality of the coming new world order, to help us ardently to desire these developments. And that's what he wants to do here. So I think all of that has to be gathered together under the eye so that we understand a project in which we are still immersed. It may have gone into some latency, some dormancy, but I think that with his new presentation of the third installment of the bridging treatises, it will emerge. Okay, the second group, I just want to see if I can, The second group, the trained observers, will inaugurate the era of light and of a free control of the astral plane with its quality of freedom from illusion and glamour, because, many of those mental illusions do precipitate in lesser form onto the astral plane and then are passionately but not wisely desired. So the observers really learn to see through all that glamour and illusion. This freedom will be brought about when right observation takes the place of the disturbed vision of the present, and glamour will be dissipated through the right direction of the light of the soul throughout the plane of illusion. And this, when he refers to that, this is very much the astral plane. The Aquarian age will be predominantly the age of synthesis and light. Yes, it is an age of universality, which is akin to synthesis, and in the light release we will see in the light released, we will see the universality which unites all things as one. Universality, there it is, okay. An era of light and free control of the astral plane. Well, this pretty much sums up our work in the glamour groups that we are, or should I say, hopefully the dissipation of glamour groups that we are working with in a weekly manner. And freedom from illusion and glamour. This freedom is brought about when the right observation, because who is the observer? Ultimately, well, at first, the soul in incarnation, then the soul on its own plane, then the triadally focused group conscious individual, and then finally the monad really is the true observer and sees through all of this. So we have a disturbed vision at the moment, and it is subject to glamour. But we use the technique of light, and we get rid of these glamours individually and help to be rid of them in a larger group context. The world is sorely in need of that. Right now, there are certain Martian sixth-ray glamours sweeping humanity, kind of a crudescence of the old sixth ray themes. The people thereby inspired by those things sense that the possibility will not be with them for very long, and they deep down know that they will be going out of incarnation for a time, and so they re-emphasize that with which they are most familiar, namely a kind of narrow sixth ray fanaticism, which is so dangerous to the gifts that the other rays could bring. Later, they will emerge again under more enlightened circumstances. The third group carries the initial impulse into the light of day. Now, in this particular case, the light of day is on the dense physical plane, but sometimes that term, the light of day, refers to Scorpio and the Buddhic plane. It's a higher type of revelatory day, not just objectivity. Day here means objectivity, and not a higher type of realization. So the third group carries the initial impulse, this is all part of the magical process, through into the light of day, and will bring the physical world into a condition whereby, quote, the healing of the nations through the arising of the Sun of Righteousness. We assume in a way this is the Christ and the Christ consciousness, and the human being who is affected by the, positively by the Christ consciousness, will become possible, because the laws of healing, which are basic and fundamental, can be applied and worked out in all departments of life upon the outer levels of appearance, for disease is only found in the world of phenomena. Well, there will be the healing of the nations, the healing of the individuals who constitute those nations. So healing is a much deeper thing than just rectifying a few things that are wrong with the physical body. We have the entire problem of the personality of humanity, which basically is the cosmic dense physical body of the planetary logos. See, the world of phenomena, this is, let's call it the dense physical body of the planetary logos. The, let's call it the lower 18 subplanes. That is the world of phenomena. Phenomena occur, of course, on the astral plane and on the lower mental plane. And probably beyond that, well, you know, from a certain perspective, phenomena occur beyond that, but we tend, from our perspective, to call that which occurs noumena rather than phenomena. You know, they are, noumena are causal of phenomena. They are substantial to phenomena. We might say that from a certain perspective, the etheric body is noumenal compared to the outworkings upon the systemic dense physical plane, which reveals phenomena. So cosmic phenomena are found on the lower 18 subplanes. This is from the cosmic perspective of the planetary logos, and systemic phenomena are found on the dense physical plane, the lower 3 subplanes of the etheric physical plane. With the etheric body, the systemic etheric body, containing what we call the noumena. For instance, when, you know, the physical body during gestation period is created, it is the noumena, the patterning impulses, very intelligent and guided by the soul, which cause the shaping up of the phenomenal vehicle, which is then born and takes its place upon the systemic, dense physical planes, gaseous, liquid, and solid. As regards telepathic communication between the members of the hierarchy, within itself, the hierarchy functions practically entirely on the plane of mind. And this is necessarily essential for two reasons, okay? Well, the plane of mind, DK tells us he works with our souls, or at least he would certainly prefer to, and no doubt does. And that means he's working on the higher three levels, particularly of the plane of mind, but using an amanuensis like Alice Bailey to bring forward that higher mental work into more concrete formulations in the lower concrete mind, or in the concrete mind. Anyway, hierarchy more and more is functioning within the subplanes of the spiritual triad, a majority of the subplanes, not all, and is making available to people the types of energy and energy patterns which are there to be found, and they are translated downward into accessibility by those who meditatively are reaching upward. Up and down, of course, it doesn't make sense. It's a question of intensification or de-intensification. That's really the up or down. Intensification is up, and de-intensification of a point of tension is down. Okay, so as regards telepathic communication between the members of the hierarchy, you might say the kind of spiritual television that they utilize between themselves, transmitting not only words, but symbols and energies. So the higher mind is very important in this transmission, but the transmission is not limited to the plane of mind. So why is this necessarily essential? For two reasons. Why is that? And maybe we'll see right here. The members of the hierarchy have freed themselves from the limitations of brain activity and brain consciousness, kind of the brain, very Saturnian instrument, produces the sequentialization of experience. And it's not so good for replicating the Uranian simultaneity of experience. So the members of the hierarchy have freed themselves from the limitations of brain activity and brain consciousness. They can, therefore, in their essential selves, when they so choose, carry on simultaneously two different lines of activity, both of real import. Always with hierarchy, there is that kind of duality, especially now when they are looking towards humanity and the type of service which can be rendered. They're also looking towards Shambhala, and they're also reorganizing themselves within their own province, which is the hierarchical point of tension. They can pursue their normal avocations upon the physical plane if functioning in physical bodies. And notice this is avocations. Their real vocation or calling has to do with the greater service they render. And when so doing, are conditioned in the performance of those activities by the brain limitations of time consciousness and space consciousness. Now, this is really important because we realize that it is the physical brain which is furthering the sense of reality of time-space consciousness, the illusion of it. It's one of the first illusions to be overcome, and not an easy one, and it occurs, the overcoming, that is, occurs initially at the third initiation. But they can also work upon the mental plane with the chitta, or mind stuff, and can do this at the same time as they are conditioned and limited by their physical mechanism. And they are then entirely freed from the time consciousness and from any such limitations as space relations within the solar system. I mean, maybe not all members of hierarchy can do that, but I guess it becomes possible to think of the solar system as one great group, and reception from any of the planets as a possibility. There develops also a sense of the simultaneity of the cooperation of the planetary deities, which can be accessed even from that point of tension we call Earth. So let's see, the brain limitations of time, space, consciousness. I want to kind of drive that point home to myself and all of us, because that's what's causing our entrapment within that time, space, consciousness. So, and yet, it's interesting, this dual mode of functioning, subject to time, space on the physical plane, and yet not subject to time, space, given their higher point of tension and their focus on the higher mental plane and beyond. I suspect that it's on the Buddhic plane particularly, which is home to so many of the hierarchy now, where time-space illusions are pretty much overcome. Even though there is what he says, a time-space schedule, which the planetary logos must observe, his own time-space schedule. So they can do this at the same time as they handle the outer plane. They're practical on the outer plane and free of typical illusions, outer plane illusions caused by brain functioning, when they work only on the outer plane, but simultaneously they know they live in a non-illusory world, and at the same time subject to illusory functioning on the very outermost plane. So, two activities at the same time. And that, will tell us a little bit about hierarchical consciousness, and we have to notice whether we can begin at all to function in that way. Can we observe or function subject to the usual laws of the physical plane and yet somehow simultaneously deeply know, feel, be impressed by, realize that all that we are subject to on the outer plane is illusory, and a part of our consciousness is never subject to those limitations? Then we would begin to say, hey, we're developing a little bit of the hierarchical consciousness. So then they are entirely freed from the time consciousness and from any such limitations as spatial or space relations within the solar system. I mean, it's all here now, you know. In that sentence, we embody a state of overcoming, you know. So let's put it down, you know. Important mantra. Whoop, sorry. Whoop. Okay. Yeah. Important mantra. It's, or really anything, it's all here now. So we have the eternal now overcoming time, and the here-ness of things. Can you have here-ness without there-ness? But we might say the immediacy of all things at a point. Now, then we work with that point. It's our point of tension, and we intensify it and we de-intensify it. And that's how we deal with what used to be the here and there. So we deal with the former here and there through the intensification and de-intensification, of our point, our point of tension in consciousness. So, you know, when we are treading the path of initiation, we may not deal so much with what is ordinarily called consciousness as work with a point of revelatory tension, which can also be a point of obscurative tension if we allow for the de-intensification. I'm sure we live at all different points of tension during our particular day, and then in our high meditations, our point of tension will intensify, will increase. And sometimes it takes a while to slip into that intensification of the point of tension, and sometimes one can do it immediately. When we have our language, it's a time-space language, is based on illusion and so forth. It's the way we communicate. But those who have experienced freedom from the illusion of what the brain function presents to our consciousness will be able to see beyond and through the ordinary language. And even though the ordinary language is used, they know that something else is meant, and they don't get trapped in the literacy of the language or the literalness of the language. You know, the people who believe in the inerrancy of the Bible as it is presented in English or any other language certainly have a difficult case to prove. They are pretty much stuck with the letter rather than the meaning. And we have to see through into the world of meaning through the outer letter of the form, the letter which presents the words, which indicate the form, but behind it is an ongoing realization of the illusory, glamorous nature of ordinary brain consciousness, at least at present, when man is still so subject in his thinking and feeling to kama manus. Okay, so about the hierarchy, right? So this is the functioning on the plane of mind. So we're talking about that, right? Okay. We are speaking of the functioning on the plane of mind. And they can choose to carry on simultaneously if they will, or they can focus just on one or the other. They need not deal with the simultaneity. They can, in their essential selves, a deeply interior state of identity, of an observer that is detached from phenomena, they can choose whether they want the high and low to be simultaneously present. So we should try it, we should work with it. And think of it, you try to sustain the non-illusory state of consciousness, even while dealing with what normally traps most people in a world of time-space illusion. And of course, you can negotiate the time-space illusion, you can handle it. But it doesn't have the same captivating power for you as it has had for others. In other words, after sufficient training, you might say, we isolate the unity in the face of all diversity. We isolate the unity in the face of all diversity. So diversity is registered, but it's not captivating. And the unity is ever present in its isolated state. We have identified it. We recognize the unity in the midst of diversity. We recognize unity in the midst of apparent diversity. Seems like a philosophical point, but I think it's important when we're training to exhibit the hierarchical consciousness. Then the next point here, the focus of their polarization is on the mental plane, and they function there as sons of mind or manus. It's a higher form of functioning, and I wouldn't be surprised we're dealing with the higher mental plane. And of course, they also, the higher initiates, have that focus on the Buddhic plane. And it's not a stretch to think of the masters having a type of focus on the Atmic plane, which is a mental plane cosmically considered. Their normal mode of intercourse is through the medium of telepathic understanding. You know, you can be with somebody you know very well, and they don't say a thing, and you say, oh yeah, I get it. And they get it from you too. This is the normal technique of a divine and free Manasaputra. I mean, in other words, we are a free soul. We become like the members of hierarchy, a free soul, a mind-born son. See, essentially, we are not the personality at all. We are that extension of the monad which works as being consciousness upon the higher mental plane. But we are more and still higher. But our next stage is to achieve a focus upon the higher mental plane, which, according to our will, is uninterrupted. That becomes really important. And we fail in our meditations, DK tells us, because we can't do that yet. We can't really focus the consciousness on the higher mental plane and sustain it there. And if we can't do that, we certainly can't do as the hierarchy does and focus that consciousness within the permissible range and permissible ranges of the spiritual hierarchy. There are some inadmissible ranges that are even beyond the master, as we have discussed. Chohans may be able to access them. Certain points of tension achieved relevant or relative to the first and second subplanes of the Buddhic and Atmic planes. And then when we are a true Chohan, then we can access what's going on the monadic plane. But maybe when you look at, let's see if I look at this, I might say that maybe Chohans of the 6th degree, which is the first stage in Chohanship, can access the Brahmic levels, or the Brahmic subplanes of the monadic plane. But I get the impression that the higher 2 subplanes are inaccessible to them, just the way the higher 2 subplanes of Atma and of the Atmic and Buddhic plane are inaccessible to masters. And then maybe initiates of the 7th degree, Chohans of the 7th, can, this is speculation, access the 5 lower subplanes of the logoic plane, but perhaps we need to be initiates of the 8th degree who can maybe follow the figure 8 back and forth between the cosmic astral and cosmic physical plane. Maybe the higher 2 subplanes are only accessible to them and not to initiates of the 7th degree. I'm just carrying the analogy upward. Okay. So these are, what can we call them? They are we're talking about the essential or the essentiality of focusing on the mental plane, and we're looking for two reasons why it is necessary for the members of the hierarchy to focus practically entirely on the plane of mind, and I would say also still higher. So on that plane of mind, the higher mind especially, they're free of the brain activity and brain consciousness, and until we can be similarly free, we don't know what the advantages are. We can't really talk about it in terms of our experience. Okay. And you know, they are definitely beyond mentally polarized. A true mental polarization occurs, as we've said, between the second and third initiation. So obviously the members of the hierarchy, maybe beginning with the third degree, are definitely mentally polarized. But they also have an antikarana, and they also have elevated their consciousness onto the Buddhic plane and some to the Atmic plane. So they don't necessarily need words the way we do in order to communicate. All right. Now a little more. This is all made possible, let's see, well, not just a little more, a lot more. This is all made possible when a human being has polarized himself in the soul consciousness, which is the higher mental plane at first, and then later the true ego or soul is the spiritual triad. When the egoic lotus is unfolding, which it probably does rapidly around the third initiation, when petals number 7, 8, and 9 are all completely unfolded, and when therefore the mental method of working is that of mental relationship or telepathy. So this new method of communication reserved for initiates and higher initiates that we call masters, all this develops around and after the third initiation, when we can say, well, the individual has really stepped into the ashram as not just hovering at the threshold of the door in, having passed 2 initiations of the threshold. Until the third initiation is passed, we are not really disciples in relation to the great star Sirius, and we have not taken any of the solar initiation. The first solar initiation and the first achieving of a discipleship relationship with Sirius, they both occur at the third, what we normally call the third initiation. Well, I think what I'll do here is I'll try to keep this one, you know, down to the hour-long range. Might be useful to do that. Now this is page 38, it looks like, and maybe, yeah, we've gone to page 37. Okay. Yes, that will only work on a Finnish keyboard. So, there we go. So, whatever page we began on, we're on page 37 now. And then we'll take up another hour program. And Tuya tells me it's easier to listen to 40 minutes than an hour, and it's easier to listen to an hour than 2 hours. And I think my record is a 6 or 7 hour program. I got carried away one day long ago and just kept talking. Anyway, this is 3435 to number 37. And again, yeah. All of this is lead up, a preamble to discussing the specific seed groups. And we're getting an idea of why they are important. Now, this is the 4th of July, and it's 35 to 37. Get rid of earlier designations. And we are finishing with 9, and we find ourselves with 10. 0, 10A, and hopefully it'll be today, 4th of July, and we'll continue from page 37. So we get the idea of the mental polarization, a high form of mental polarization, working with souls on the higher mental plane that is common to hierarchy. We get the idea of the time-space illusions, which are caused by the limitations of brain consciousness and how hierarchy functions above and beyond that kind of brain consciousness, but can, if it wishes, function simultaneously in practical outer plane brain consciousness, accompanied by inner plane realizing of the illusory nature of that which brain consciousness reveals. Now, we can talk about it, but until we have experienced this dual type of activity, it probably doesn't mean as much as it should. We've talked about 3 types of seed groups and how they represent the 3 divine aspects, first, second, and third, and then have to do with the mental plane particularly, and then the emotional plane, and then the physical plane. So that would be the telepathic communicators, the observers of reality, and the magnetic healers, you know, in that order. So we've dealt with some important subjects here, talking about, you know, why the seed groups are important. And then we'll go on in a little bit with the next part that has to do with the mental polarization and the increasing mental polarization of the race. Now, at first, basically, what we have is not so much mental polarization as we have mental focusing, which is a lesser stage. Okay, friends, so thank you for attending. Lots of love, many blessings. Study hard, meditate deeply, and find the best way for you and your groups to apply what you learn. My wife just came into the temple. I'm giving her a little wave there. Okay, I'll be back in a little bit.